Hey everyone, it's Hidesh. From this video, we're going to be looking at Gokigen Central Rook. Gokigen means cheerful. So it's Cheerful Central Rook. The name of this strategy has to do something with its inventor, professional player Masakazu Kondo, and his personality is that he's cheerful, especially when he's playing this strategy, so I hear. Well, I don't know if it's true, I've never seen him so cheerful, but even his playing style is called Cheerful Style, and thus this strategy was also named Cheerful Central Rook. So it's a pretty funny way of naming a strategy, but that's what it is. So Gokigen Central Rook. And in this first video of Gokigen Central Rook, I'm going to be talking about the very basics of Gokigen Central Rook, in which I'll guide you to the entrance of the most primary variations of this strategy, and then I'll talk a little bit about other minor variations which are actually very important to learn in the first place, and which I'm going to go deeply into in some other videos in the future, such famous ones like Golden Right to 5H variation. Alright, so let's get started. Gokigen Central Rook is basically white strategy, and it starts with pawn to 7f, 3d, and 2f. And the next fourth move is the entrance of Gokigen Central Rook, and it's pawn to 5d. And this move is what characterizes this strategy, as opposed to classic style Central Rooks, in which white normally plays pawn to 4d, blocking the bishop diagonal. Well, because the reason is, as the proverb says, try to make a bishop exchange against a ranging rook. So what I mean is, you push this pawn, he defends there with a bishop, and classic style Central Rook goes like, for example, this kind of piece structure. But if this bishop's diagonal is not blocked, black can make a bishop trade and take out that defender on the 2d, so black can break the second file anytime. So that's because in classic ranging rook strategy, white always pushes the fourth 5 pawn to here, the 4d, to reject the bishop trade. But in this Gokigen Central Rook, he keeps the bishop diagonal open and he plays pawn to 5d. Right now, what white is trying to do here is, if I were to just move only white's pieces, he wants to push this pawn to make a vanguard pawn here on the 5th file, swing the rook over to 5th file, of course, and then let's say he develops a silver along that file, and eventually attack these squares, and he's going to start a full-scale battle with pushing the button here with pawn to 5f at the end, supported by the strong rook, and also it opens the bishop's diagonal. So that's the basic idea of the Central Rook strategy. So what should black do here? Well, one option might be pushing the pawn up to 5f, stopping white's pawn from going ahead. But this will lead to a completely different game, which is pretty difficult. White can swing the rook over to 5b, and maybe he'll try to open fire later on 5e square. Or, he can make a bishop trade and drop it to here. Maybe black too drops the bishop to here. And maybe it's pretty difficult and interesting. But it's not the main line, so let's not go into that. And, well, here's a question. What if at this position black makes a bishop trade from his side and then drop it to here? Well, then white is fine by another bishop drop to 4b, and the reason is, you see, the 2f square is occupied with its own piece, so the bishop cannot promote it there. So the Joseki move at this position is actually a very normal move, as pawn to 2e. And this time, you can easily see that black is threatening to make that bishop trade and bishop drop to here. As you can see, now 2f square is now available. So what is white going to do here? All right, first of all, pawn to 5e is not very good, because black can just go ahead, pawn exchange on the second file, and the only thing that black has to be careful is this pawn push, which black has to take because pawn promotion 5g is too powerful. So you take it, then bishop trade, and a bishop fork. Well, but actually it's fine. You can go ahead, taking the knight. He'll take the silver, But this kind of situation often happens in many variations, but always you have this knight drop, which is pretty good. It blocks the bishop's diagonal, which allows you to take the lance with the dragon, and also this knight attack is very powerful. So actually this position is good for black. So at this position, here he can't push the pawn to 5e, okay? So white's Joseki move here is this: rook to 5b, protecting that 5c square, thus preventing that bishop trade. Okay, so now here's the question. Can black go pawn to 2d? Well, the answer is pretty difficult, but basically it's not so good for black. He'll take it, and you recapture with the rook, and then he'll make that bishop trade, of course. And well, one option is bishop drop to 3c, and if you go ahead taking the knight this time, bishop takes a silver, and well, let's say bishop drop to 7g, he takes the knight, and you take the lance. But this time, it's white that has the chance to drop his knight to 5e, which blocks the horse's diagonal and making a really powerful attack here. So this position is good for white. So after that bishop fork, black has to move the rook back to 2h, and white's best move here will be pawn to 2f. And if you're familiar with side pawn picker opening already, you'll notice this line is very similar to one of the lines in side pawn picker opening. If you want to check it out, just go to side pawn picker number 1. So basically we know at this position black should move his knight to 7g, he'll swing the rook over to 2b, and maybe silver to 3h. Well, after that, one example is silver to 4b, king starts castling. Well, making a opposing pawn here is not going to work, because after the silver comes over, bishop to 4d, threatening a pawn drop here, so black has to drop his own pawn, and it's an awkward position. So let's say king to 6h, and I don't know, maybe bishop 4d, protecting that pawn, and king goes ahead, king castles, like that. And basically it's not a welcome position for black, right? White may eventually activate this pawn or silver to attack the 7th file, for instance. And well, also instead of this knight to 7g, we've learned that silver to 7g is not very good in side pawn picker opening, because rook 2b. And well, other than silver to 3h, you can also protect there with a gold, trying to protect the rook with 2 pieces, or other than that, bishop, protecting there from the distance. But let's say 0 to 3h. And we've learned at this position, white can sack his bishop and drop it here. So 0 to 7g is not very good. However, actually, it's not so simple. I didn't show it in the side pawn picker opening video, but let's see the consequence after this. This pawn sack is actually stopped by this pawn sack on 2d, based on this bishop drop, skewering the rook and the king. So maybe he'll sack this way, but rook takes it, rook promotes, and let's say he trades it and drop it here. Well, you can block it with a rook again, and well, no, black has a bishop, so it's difficult for white to find a very good square for the dragon to move to. For instance, here will be met by this bishop drop, for instance. So this position is pretty difficult, but anyway, it's not so welcomed by black, right? So after this bishop fork, it's not a good position for black. And moreover, instead of this bishop fork, white can also have another good move, and that is silver to 2b. And what he's trying to do now is he's trying to drop his bishop now to here in the next move, forking these 2 pieces. So rook has to go back, but another pawn drop on 2g. If you take it, bishop drop. So you have to run maybe 7h, 5h, or 1h. And he'll move the silver, showing the possibility of swinging the rook over to 2b, like that. So maybe gold to 3h, and they castle like that. But as you can see, it's not a welcomed position for black, right? I mean, taking this pawn is not a very good structure. So finally, from this position, it's just that black cannot make that pawn exchange on the second file. Okay, so black's next move is going to be a general move, right? And let's see the most normal one, and that is silver to 4h, the very normal move that is made by static rook side. And after seeing this move, I will now push this pawn up to 5e, achieving that vanguard pawn on the fifth file. Okay, so again, this question, can we go now pawn to 2d? Well, I'm going to say the answer is no, because you go ahead, and then as I've said, you have to be careful with this pawn push to 5f. You have to take it. He makes a bishop trade and a bishop fork. You can only go ahead. He takes a silver, and maybe that knight drop on 5e. But this time, the conclusion is a good position for white, because this structure, the wall structure, is awful. The king cannot run to the right side of the board, and you see this side is also unguarded. So whatever line follows this position, this wall structure is going to be a downside for black. So actually at this position, after pawn to 5e, you cannot go pawn to 2d. So from here, black can only keep making castle, and that is probably gold to 5h from the right. Well, it can be king to 6h. It doesn't matter. The point is now that he's now protecting this square with 2 pieces. So that means now black can go ahead pawn to 2d in the next move, because if white leaves it that way, pawn trade here, and he'll open this bishop's diagonal. But since this square is protected by 2 pieces, black can simply block the bishop's diagonal, for instance, and fifth file is fine. So it means the pawn trade on the second file is now possible. So white's next move will be bishop to 3c, finally. So, well, they go ahead, make castles like that. Well, the moves are arbitrarily. He can keep castling, or maybe silver to 4b. It doesn't matter. And actually, this line is the entrance of the most primary variations of white's Gokigen Central Rook versus black's static rook. And from this position, black basically has 3 ways to deal with this central rook. If I were to show those, one is developing a silver from 3g and then to 4g, 4f. So let's call it silver to 4f rapid attack. And another rapid attack is pawn to 4f, trying to protect that file in the next move. I mean, basically, it's not so good for white to make the pawn trade here, because he's going to lose that vanguard pawn. So maybe like that. So black will basically be able to move the silver here, and well, I think there might be 2 options going like that, or developing the knight. So let's call this silver 4g rapid attack. Oh, and in case of rapid attacks, the last silver often comes over to here, which is a normal move in rapid attacks. And other than these 2 rapid attacks, black's another option is make it a slow game, and that is closing his bishop's diagonal and moving the gold over here, and maybe castling into Mino, left hand Mino, or maybe Anagama if possible. So this is the entrance of the primary variations of Gokigen Central Rook. Okay, now before we finish this video, we have to go back, and here at this position before silver to 4h, I'm going to have to talk about other variations which are pretty important. So here, instead of the silver to 4h, black has several other options that are gold to 5h from the right, and also gold to 6h, and lastly gold to 7h. And the idea of these gold moves is that they make it possible for black to make that pawn exchange on the 2d square. So let me first explain it with gold to 7h. So obviously this gold protects the bishop, so now the bishop is protected by 2 pieces. So that means after that bishop trade on 8h, the silver won't be a floating piece. So if white tries to push the 5 pawn now, well, black can make a pawn trade, right? But since the bishop's diagonal is still open, white can't protect that square with a bishop. It's gonna be just taken out, and black can break the second file anyway. So with this move of gold to 7h, pawn exchange on the second file is now guaranteed for black. So it's a pretty good idea. And the downside of this gold to 7h is that now it's a little bit difficult to castle his king effectively in the left side, right? Right, now let's see other two options, gold to 6h and gold to 5h from the right, which are very similar to each other as to their concept. So let me explain by gold to 5h from the right. And actually, this move also guarantees that pawn trade on the 2D square. And I know it sounds a little bit strange because after 0 to 4h, we've learned that the pawn to 2D is not possible for black. But this time, after gold 5h from the right, now I'm saying pawn to 2D is okay. Well, I mean, he pushes the pawn to 5e basically, but then Joseki move is black goes ahead 2D. So this small difference of 0 to 4h or gold to 5h makes a huge difference of whether pawn to 2D is good for black or good for white. And I think I'm going to tell you why in the next video, in which I'm going to cover this gold to 5h variation, which is one of the most important and basic variations in Gokigen Central Rook. So please look forward to it. Hope you enjoy the video, and I'll see you next time.